Okay, so I believe there are no questions. Alert is an easy box on Hack the Box, but well, Hack the Box machines are always labeled easy, but sometimes it demands a little um like technical know-how. Right? But Hack the Box is a really great platform to learn penetration testing. So without wasting much time, we'll just get right into the box. Right. So normally, as usual, as attackers, we always start with getting our target's IP address and then running an Nmap scan on it. Um, you can see me installing Zoom over here. Okay, so basically, I like to run Nmap like this, where I run the default scripts, look for service, do service detection, and then allow the variables flag. Paste in my target IP and name the output file, like where I want Nmap to save, or the file, the name I want Nmap to save the scan to. And I normally call that maybe the name of the box, maybe alert.nmap, right? Okay, now this can take some time to run, so I've already run it. So we can just have a look at that. And from the scan that I did, right, you can see that we have two ports open. We have SSH open and we have port 80 open. Now, as usual, Hack the Box machines, you would have to enter the domain name into your Etsy host file, like your local DNS, should I say database. Yeah, you would have to enter the domain over there together with the IP address. We can do that shortly. We're just going to use the Vim utility to insert that into a host file. I've already done that, but let me just show you. Okay, so it's over here. So this is our IP address, and then this is our domain name. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can see that we have two ports open, SSH and 80. Normally, as attackers, we would always want to go for the low-hanging fruit. So we normally want to attack 80 first, since SSH doesn't really have, I don't know, it doesn't really have very serious remote code execution bugs. And even most of the remote code execution bugs related to SSH are like really old ones, right? It's very uncommon to come across like an SSH bug. So we normally want to go for the low hanging fruits, things we can easily abuse. Okay. So we are going to, since we have HTTP ports open over here, we are going to try to access it from our browser, and we just paste in the IP. Now, with most HTTP machines, when you paste in the IP, it will try to resolve to the domain name, and then it will pull up the components of the page using that particular domain name. So you can see that we are presented with a page over here, a web application, which allows us to view Markdown. Which allows us to view Markdown. Okay, so we can just start looking at this application and browsing around to see what is available on this application. Basically, what we can find with this application. Right, so we want to first know like the functionality of the application, because if you want to penetration test, if you want to penetrate anything, right, or if you want to test anything, you need to know like what exactly that particular program does firstly before like you attempt to do anything. So currently we want to know like the kind of features that are available on the application that we can abuse. Right, so we'll just do a general like how should I even say it? We'll just do a general I don't know, we'll just go around, look around the application and see what's available. So over here, you can see that we have a Markdown viewer where we can upload files. We can just upload the file right now, and then we'll see how this is working. But before we even go to that, right, before we even get to that, let's just look at the other features down the box. We can see the contact us page allows us to enter an email and a message, just like any contact us page on the internet, right? This one also works the same way. You can enter your email, enter your message, and then that particular request gets sent to the backend, and then the administrators can view that message. We also have the About Us page, You can see that it's a normal about us page. You can see, hello, we are late. Our services gives you the ability to view Markdown. Yeah. So basically about the website, right? You can see with the about us, there's nothing really interesting that we can do over here. There are no buttons to click or anything. But another thing too is that sometimes you want to verify by looking at the page source to see whether there's actually nothing like to explore over here. We can also look at the donate page. Over here, we can also enter an amount that we want to donate over here. Now, you'd realize that when anytime I click on any of these options at the top here, you realize that there's this page that is pointing to like a particular file, right? So if you are someone that plays CTF a lot, like the first thing that will come to your head, over here is file inclusion. I tried file inclusion when I was like doing this box, and I realized that like that wasn't the way in. And we'll come to see why that is not like we'll come to see why that didn't work or that's not going to work in the first place. But just to prove it, right? Maybe we can try to include etc password. And you see that it says error node page not found. So later on, while we are going through this box, we'll come to see why like this is happening and that particular type of exploitation is not working. Okay. So now that we've gone through the website, we've seen like what the website has to offer and all that. We can start now like diving deep into like the features and seeing like how the features work in general. So over here, you can see that we have a Markdown viewer. So I'm assuming that you can upload a Markdown file and then you click on view Markdown and it's going to render it in the browser for you. Yeah, so we can test that. Now, if you don't know about Markdown is just like HTML, right? We can write Markdown syntax and then it will get displayed in our browser. So just like HTML, Markdown also allows you to like insert scripts and a whole lot of things that you can do with HTML. So what we are going to do is that we are just going to test this feature, right? We just want to see how it's working. So I'm going to create a simple Markdown file. We'll upload it to the website and then we'll see how like it's working. Like when we click on view Markdown, we'll see like how it's rendering that particular Markdown. So let me just clear the terminal. We'll open up, we'll create a file called, let's see, bts.md, right? Markdown files normally end with the .md extension. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to create a heading, right? And I'm going to call this test, and then I'm going to just insert some simple Markdown syntax. Now, this Markdown syntax is used to embed images into the Markdown page. So it is used to embed images into the Markdown page. So I'm going to do 10.10. Okay, let's not even worry about that for now. Let me just use some random IP address. We'll test the functionality like better later on. So I'm just putting some random IP address over here. We just want to see how like it's going to render in the browser. So let's go back to the browser and then select and upload our Markdown file. So I'm just going to look for the location of my Markdown file. It's in desktop. And then alerts. So I'm going to upload bts.md. That's the file that I created. And then I'm going to click on view Markdown. So as you can see over here, you realize that I first put a heading inside my Markdown file. It has been rendered over here. So you can see it has been rendered over here. I'm sure it's still trying to pull out the resource that I put inside, like the image I embedded is still trying to pull it down. That is why it's still loading, maybe. And you can see that like the Markdown is basically being rendered over here. And then we have a share Markdown feature over here. We can click on share Markdown. And when you click on share Markdown, it's basically the Markdown file, right? So the website allows you to like share the markdown file. So if you like upload your markdown file, right, it gets rendered. You can share this link with anyone, and the person will get the rendered markdown, the rendered markdown page. Okay, so that's what the share feature helps us to do. So I'm just going to note down the features that we are currently seeing on the targets. Let me just move this here. And I'm going to open up Notepad. And I'm going to say share feature. I'm going to put a link here. So we have a share feature over here, right? Okay. Another thing we would do, right? We want to see if like the markdown that is being rendered, right? Whether let's say something is happening on the back end, right? That is maybe or like there's some back end scripts that is actually like rendering our file. So one thing we can do is that we'll upload like a markdown file that contains a link to pull and like to embed an image, right? And then we'll put our IP address in there, and then we'll start our HTTP server to see if like we get a hit from like the web server, like this part, these are targets, that's alert.htb. If the IP comes out and it happens to be a target, then probably maybe that is the way to go. Like we'll probably go towards that direction and see whether like we can exploit the box in that direction. I don't know whether I should demonstrate that, like for the sake of time. Let's just do that quickly. So I'm just going to edit this file. And this time I'm going to put my IP in here. And I'm going to start an HTTP server. So I'm just going to do ifconfig and 0 and get my IP address. Then I'm going to start my HTTP server. So my HTTP server is running on ports 8000. I'm going to specify 8000. I'm going to say maybe test.png. So I'm going to call this test 2 because the first one was test, right? Or let's just say test 2. Then I go back to the website, upload and see what happens. Okay, so we have the file here. I'm going to upload it and I'll click on view markdown. Okay, so you can see that I tried to embed the image, but it wasn't like locating the image. So it just used that text that I put inside those square brackets. If I go back to my terminal and I look at my HTTP server, you can see that we have some HTTP requests coming in. But unfortunately, right, these requests are coming from like my own machine, right? Which means that this particular markdown, right, or this particular when the markdown got converted, right, it's actually pulling the resources from my machine, like from the client side, right? So it means that like the machine is not like, or the target is not like processing it, or the target is not like rendering it on the back end itself. It's just converting it to HTML syntax and then sending it to my browser for my browser to like do all the work, like render it and do all the work. So you can see from this that is not like an attack path, right? So we are going to explore other things on the box. Now, but before we go back to our browser, right? I'm just going to do a small directory brute force, right? To discover other files that are on the box. So I'm going to do go basta a directory brute force on the URL http alex.htb. And then I'm going to use the word list rafts medium directories. I've forgotten how we specify extensions in GoBasta. I think it's -X. I'm not very sure. But let's see. This is no search bar. Okay, so let's just look at the GoBasta help screen. Okay, so you can see, okay, so supposed to be a small x, not a large one. So it's supposed to be a small x. Okay. Now I'm only doing I'm looking for PHP files because if you look on the targets, right? if you look on the target, you can see that it's actually a PHP web server, and then there are PHP files that are being saved over here. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to leave it running while we explore other features on the targets. Yeah, so we are back at the home page, right? We've looked at the Markdown viewer feature and realized that it's just converting our Markdown syntax to like HTML, and then it is displaying it in the browser, right? Now, to even prove that it is viewing or it is converting our Markdown to, okay, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about that later. So we've looked at the Markdown feature. Let's also look at the contact us feature. Normally, right? People as attackers would normally want to look for an XSS in the contact us feature. Now, probably whoever developed the site is not doing any proper filtering or sanitization, right? So we'll test the contact us page for XSS to see whether like our payload gets triggered or anything. So I'm just going to put in my email here. I'm going to call it fire@gmail.com. And then I'm going to put in a payload. Now, the payload I'm going to put in over here is going to do a callback to my server. And then when it does that callback to my server, I know that like that particular application is vulnerable to XSS injection. So just from the directory brute force that we are doing, like this is just by the way, right? From the directory brute force we are doing, you can see that we can find some very interesting files on the machine over here. Okay, so that's just by the way. Let's go back to what we wanted to do. So we are testing the contact us page to see if it has an XSS vulnerability. So I'm going to start my HTTP server, right? And then I'm going to put in a payload that will call back to my HTTP server and will make me know if like that particular website is vulnerable to XSS or not. So I'm going to insert my HTTP server. I'm going to enter the payload that is going to pretend as if my HTTP server is hosting an image that's it's hosting an image, right? So I think this was 114.186 on port 8000. And I'm going to close the tag. Sorry. I'm going to close the tag and then send this off to the target, right? So let's send this and see what happens. So it says message sent successfully. We'll look at our HTTP server and just wait to see whether we get any callbacks. Let me just confirm the IP again. I think maybe I might have made an error in the IP address. So rfconfig and 0. Okay, so this is 183. I think I made it 186. Let me just go back. In the payload. Okay, I made it 186. Supposed to be 183. And then the fire@gmail.com. So let's send this payload. And then go back to our HTTP server and see whether we get a callback here. And you can see that we get a callback from the target's IP address, right? So if I ping alert.htv, you realize that alert.htv has this IP address, and then we have the same IP address, but giving or calling back to our server, which means that there's a probable XSS on it. In fact, I wouldn't even call it a probable XSS. We can see that there's XSS on the target, right? Okay, so let's get back to our directory brute force and see whether we can access some of the resources that is found over here. We can see the CSS directory, which is not really interesting to us. The contact.php is basically this page. Contact us. If you look at the page source, you realize that it's posting the data to contact.php. I'm just waiting for, okay. Okay, so you can see that it's just posting the data to contact.php. So that also is not of much interest to us. Now, what is really new over here? One thing that I've not seen yet over here is the uploads messages and then messages.php. So I can try to, what I'm going to try to access the uploads directory and see what we can find over there. You can see we are forbidden. So we don't have permission to access this particular resource. Okay, let's look at other resources that we have. We have index.php, which is basically the web like sort of like the first page. I don't know. We've come across it before. So we also found another interesting one called slash messages. So let's check out slash messages and see what we can find there too. Okay. Messages. You can see that is also forbidden. Let's look at messages.php and see what we can get over there too. PHP. Oh, so with messages.php, it's not displaying anything. You can see that it's not saying forbidden or anything, but it's just not displaying anything. It's blank over here. If you try to look at the source, you can see that the source is also blank. Okay, so let's just put that down as a finding, right? So we'll say messages dot php is blank. Okay, so I'm going to take questions. Like before we proceed, I would like to take questions. Like, is there anything that I've done that is not understandable, or you want me to explain again, or if there are any suggestions that you have, I'm taking them. Yeah, so anyone. Hello, are you guys there?
Yeah, we are here.
Okay, so I'm guessing that there are no questions up to this point.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I can assume there are no questions up to this point. Okay, so we found two very interesting features. We have, first of all, the Markdown viewer page, and then we have the contact us page. Now we found out that the contact us page is vulnerable to XSS injection, right? Vulnerable to XSS. And the Markdown viewer, basically, we didn't find any vulnerability with the Markdown viewer. It only converts the Markdown that we give it to HTML and then gives it to our browser to display. Okay, so now if you know Markdown very well, Markdown is just like HTML, right? What's the flexibility that HTML gives you, like you can do the same with Markdown. So what we are going to do is that you realize that there are certain pages that we could not access. That is messages.php and messages, right? So what we are going to do is that we know that this contact us, right? This contact us is vulnerable to XSS. And then this markdown feature helps us to, or allows us to upload markdown files and then share the link with, like, we are able to share the markdown link with anyone, right? And I already said that markdown is just like HTML. It gives you the flexibility that HTML gives you, like you can insert scripts and all that. So we are going to put in a script, right, into that markdown file. That is going to make an internal like HTTP request to any resource that is in the box, right? And then we'll try to see whether we can get a callback. I don't know if that is clear to everyone yet. So I'm just going to explain it again. So we currently have XSS on the contact us page, right? And this markdown feature allows us to create markdown files and share with other people. Now, Markdown works just like HTML, right? So it gives you the flexibility that HTML comes with, where you can insert scripts and all that, right? So what we are going to do is that we'll create a Markdown page, right? We'll create a Markdown page that contains like malicious XSS code or JavaScript code, right? And that malicious JavaScript code, all what it's going to do is that it's going to call back to our HTTP server, right? Just to confirm that like we have XSS on the target, right? We have XSS on the target machine. So what we are going to do is, sorry, just to confirm that when we send the markdown file to like the target, right, it gets executed on the target and then we get the callback. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my attacker machine. I'm going to edit bts.md. Oh wait, we don't even have to edit it. We already have the link in here. So what I'm going to do is that you realize that when I uploaded that file, right, it gave me this link to share, right? So this time, instead of the XSS payload that I entered, right, I'm going to insert the markdown link, like the link to the markdown file that I just created, right? So let me just start my HTTP server. And Python 3 minus HTTP.server. My HTTP server is based run on 8,000. This is what the share link. This is what the share link looks like, right? I'm going to re-upload. I'm going to re-upload the page. Sorry, the markdown file again. So it's bts.md. I'm going to click on view markdown and click on share markdown. I'm going to copy this link, right? And then I'm going to put that in here. So I'll come to that shortly. Let's just go back to our HTTP server and then refresh, like clear, and start it again. Okay, I'm going to enter my mail here. I'm going to say fire@gmail.com, and I'm going to insert my XSS payload here. This time I'm going to enter an iframe. You can still use an image, but I prefer using the iframe. That's all. But it's still going to do the same job. So I have an iframe tag over here. I'm just going to close this. And over here, you can see that this is the link to the markdown file that I created, like the share link to the markdown file that I uploaded. I'm going to send this request, right? And when I send this request, the XSS gets executed, like the XSS code gets executed. It tries to pull the content of this markdown file, right? It tries to pull the content of this markdown file, and then the content of the markdown file gets executed on the users on the victim side, right? It gets executed on the victim side, and we get a callback to our HTTP server, right? So if this works properly, right? If this works as we expect, right? We should get if this works properly, right? We should get an HTTP. We should get an HTTP. What's the name? Callback on our HTTP server, right? We should get a callback on HTTP server. So we can click on send, and after a while, we can just wait. After a while, you can see that yes, we are getting a callback from the server, which is trying to get the test.png file. You can see 404 is not found. I don't have that file currently being hosted on my server, but you can see that the request came in, right? So let's just look at the attack chain again. So we found an XSS on the targets, right? And then we realized that the markdown feature allows us to be able to upload markdown files and share with other people. So once we have that particular markdown file uploaded, we take the share link and then we insert that into the XSS payload. Now, when that XSS payload is being sent to the victim, it gets executed, and then the content of that markdown file gets also executed, right? So you can see that the content of the markdown file that I had over here, bts.md, is just basically an embedded link, right? A link that embeds an image called test.png. And upon execution, or like upon the execution of the XSS payload, it calls out to my server to get that particular image, right? So this is where it gets interesting. So one thing we can do is that since we have since we can okay, so you can see that you can already start to see the attack chain. Now you can see that we had a callback to our HTTP server. So what we are going to do now is that we are going to put a malicious script into our markdown file, right? We're going to put a malicious script into our markdown file that will allow us to make HTTP requests to internal services on our target, right? You know, sometimes when developers are writing code for web servers, because they know that maybe it will be vulnerable or it's still in like the development phase, right? They host it only internally, right? So they use the 127.0.0.1 IP instead of like the all interfaces, or instead of exposing it, right? So we are going to use, or we are going to leverage this particular bag to access internal resources, like internal resources that are hosted like internally. Now, the way by which we can do that is that we can insert some malicious JavaScript into the Markdown file. We can insert some malicious JS into the Markdown file. Now, when that Markdown file, we place it into the XSS payload, and then we send it off to the targets or to the victim. It gets executed on the victim, and then that code runs, and we get a callback to our HTTP server. So I'm just going to show you what the payload, the JavaScript payload, is going to look like. This is just an exploit that I wrote to automate the process, but I just want to explain it. I just want to explain it thoroughly right now. Then, after explaining it, we can look at how to use this automated exploit too. Okay, so we have our JavaScript payload. Let me just open up an editor. So all what this JavaScript code is doing is that it's first going to fetch a particular resource on the target, right? So it's just going to make a, let me just clear this to clear any confusions, right? And let me put HTTP here. Alerts .htd. Now, basically, what is going to happen is that it's first going to fetch the resource, right? It's first going to fetch the resource. Now, whatever response it gets from fetching that particular resource, right, is going to take that data and post it to another server, another HTTP or another server, yes. So over here, I would have my attacker-controlled server over here. It was 183, and let's say on port 8000. Okay, so over here, I'll have my attacker-controlled HTTP server over here, which will be listening for like incoming connection. So it will fetch the resource from here. It will save that particular response, right? And then it will try to post that. It will try to send a post request containing that data to my HTTP server. And then when I receive that HTTP response, or when I receive that post request, I can see the contents of what alerts.htb, right? That is accessing it from inside the box, right? So when this script gets executed, right, it's this script gets executed as like it gets executed, or the request gets sent from 127.0.1 because the request gets sent like internally, right? It gets sent from the target itself because it's triggered on the victim's end, right? So I'm just going to add the script tags over here. Then we can copy off this payload, put it into a Markdown file, and then wait for a callback on our HTTP server. So I'm going to put my script tags over here. I already said that Markdown allows you or gives you the flexibility that HTTP also comes with. And let me just close this. And we can copy this and just right click. That's LL. That's okay. LL. Then we can copy this. In fact, let me just name this my Markdown file. Right? Let me just say MVLL. And let's call this ll.md. Okay. Now we have a new Markdown file called ll.md. We are going to upload this, right? When we upload this to the target, right, it will provide us a share link. We'll use that share link inside the XSS payload. We'll send it off to the victim. That XSS gets executed. The Markdown inside the XSS also gets rendered, right? And that is executed on the client side. So on the client side, this HTTP request will be sent, and then it will grab the response, and then it will post the response to my HTTP server over here. Now, I'm not going to use the traditional Python HTTP server because if you use the traditional Python HTTP server, you can only see like the logs over here, right? You can only see maybe you had a GET request or a POST request, but you cannot really see the data that the request is coming with, especially when it's like a post request. You cannot really see the data. So because of that, I'm going to use netcat to listen instead. So I'm just going to say NC minus LMVP, and I'm going to listen on 8000. So this way, the full HTTP like request or the full HTTP post request gets sent to this netcat listener, and we can view it over here. So we are now calling it ll.md. let's go back to our Markdown viewer. We upload it, we get the share link, and then we'll continue from there. So desktop, CTF, hack the box, alerts, and then we upload ll.md. Click on view Markdown, and we'll just copy this link. Now, because this when we first upload it, right, it tries to render it, right? It tries to render it, but on our side, right? It doesn't render it on the client side, sorry, on the target side, but on our side. So most likely this thing would have been sent to my Netcat. Okay, it hasn't been sent. Okay, let me double check. Let me double check this. And just config again and verify the IP address. That's 14.183 on ports 8000. I don't know why it's not sending to my Netcat, but that should have worked. Let's see, probably maybe URL encoding issues. Let me just view the source of the page. Okay, so that should have worked. I don't know why exactly that is not working, but let me copy this share link, right? And then paste it in my browser and see whether when I do that, it actually executes. Let's see, let's see. Let's go back to my terminal. Okay, so that doesn't execute. Let me just check the console. It says some cut error. Property. Okay. I know the problem. It has to do with one of the brackets. It has to do with the brackets. When I was writing it in Python, I had to double the brackets to escape them. So let me just edit ll.md again. So I just have to clear where I have doubled the brackets. Please, if you have any questions, like you can ask me. If you have any concerns, you can ask me. I'm ready to like try to break down whatever I'm doing here. So I'm going to upload it again. Let's just close this. The same ll.md, click on view Markdown. And let's go back to our Netcat and see what we find. Oh, okay. You can see that we received the HTTP request, but this got rendered on our side. So like you can see that the IP over here is my IP, right? So with this, this is not what we want, right? So we currently have the share link. We'll use that share link to send it off to the targets. So let me just copy the link. Let's go back to the contact us page. We'll say fire.gmail.com, and then we'll insert our iframe. So iframe src is equal to paste in there. Sorry. And then we close the iframe and then send it off to the targets. Okay, now let's go back to our Netcat listener and see what we have. Okay. Oh, the request came from our, let me just clear this. Let me send it again. Let me see. Fire@gmail.com. Let me set the iframe src. Sorry, src is equal to the Markdown link. Close it and send it off. Okay. Okay, so over here you can see that this is the host. Like I got confused over here. I wasn't paying attention to it. So this is the host, like this is the server, like this is my server, like this is my IP address, this is the host IP address, because it's making the request to my server. So obviously it's my IP address that will be used as the host. But when you look at connection received over here, you can see that is the target IP address that we have over here. So you can see that currently we are able to leverage the XSS vulnerability to make requests from inside the box, right? Or from inside the target, right? I don't know if you've exploited any SSRF bugs before, but normally we abuse SSRFs for the request to look like it's coming from the server itself. Okay, so we are going to try to access certain things that we were not able to access before, right? If you go back to when we go back to our directory brute forcing, okay, I've cleared that. But then we took note of that. We realized that we are not able to access this particular link, messages.php. So now that we have, we can mimic requests coming, like we can mimic requests for them to look like they're coming from inside the box, right? We are going to try to access this resource, right? So inside our payload, so we are just going to open up vim error.md, and over here in the fetch, we are going to replace it with the page that we want to access. That is messages.php. I'm going to right quit, go back and start my Netcat listener again. In fact, let me not start it right now, because immediately I uploaded it to get rendered, and then I would have to come and cancel this and restart it again. So we upload error.md. It gets rendered. We'll copy the share link. We'll go back to the contact us page. Before we send off the payload, let's just start our Netcat listener. And then we'll enter the email here, fire@gmail.com. We'll see iframe src is equal to, we'll paste, and then we'll close it and then send it off to the target. Okay, now let's go back to our listener, and then you can see that we are currently able to make we are currently able to access that particular resource internally, and the content of that particular when it's accessed, when that particular resource is accessed internally, we can see that it's trying to, or the content of that particular file is trying to access this messages.php with a URL parameter called file, right? So if I can copy this, let's just copy this. You can see that it's including a file called 2024 blah blah blah.txt. So I suspect that when you do the contact us, right, it saves it to a TXT file, and then the administrator on the other side is able to use like this functionality to access that particular contact us message, right? So over here, we can also suspect, or we can start to suspect that, okay, maybe this this particular file could be vulnerable to a file inclusion, because over here you can see that a .txt file is being included over here. So we are going to modify our exploit a bit, right? So this time we are going to hit messages.php. We'll provide this URL get URL parameter and see whether maybe we can access local files on the target. So edit the file error.md, and this time with messages.php, we are going to give it a URL parameter, a URL get parameter, and then we are going to specify the file. So this time we are going to direct traverse until we hit the roots, and then once we hit the root, we try to access the etc password file. Now, sometimes you may not know how many times you're supposed to traverse to get to the file that you want. So one trick you can do is that you can keep traversing. So you traverse so many times, so you hit the root directory, right? So maybe you can test it so many times, so like you are able to hit the root directory, and then you can start forming your path to the file that you want to target. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and then we upload this. Let's run our nmap. Sorry, I said nmap. Netcat listener. Let's go back to our browser. Here's the browser. Okay, I click on the Markdown viewer. We upload a newly crafted Markdown file. .md. click on View Markdown, and then click on Copy Link. Oh no, I forgot. So it has, this request actually came from my target machine. So you can see that we have 10.14, blah, blah, blah. Right, so I'm just going to clear it. And then now we are going to share that particular markdown file with the target using the XSS vulnerability. Need to enter fire@gmail.com. We put in our iframe with our source pointing to the share file or the shared file, the shared MD file. And then we can close this off and then send it off to the targets. Now, if this works, right, when we look at our Net Catalyst now, we should see like the context of the Etsy password file there. And you can see over here that we have the contents of the Etsy password file over here. So we have the contents of the Etsy password file over. You can see we have different users over here. We can see Albert, we can see David, we can see Albert, and we can also see the root user over here. Right, so right now we've been able to confirm that we can get file read on the target using the XSS vulnerability, right? So you see how we've been able to chain a series of vulnerabilities to like read files, like read local files. Yeah, so like basically in the real world, that's how most of the time it's like you might not get like how should I put it? You might not get a straightforward vulnerability that gives you access to the targets, right? You might have to chain a lot of vulnerabilities to actually gain access to the target. So this box is a nice box that demonstrates how like you can use or you can escalate an XSS bug to actually read local files. Okay, so now, like you realize the process we have to go through before like we are able to upload a new Markdown file, specify the path in it. Before we upload it, we exploit the XSS and all that to be able to read the file. Like it's a very long process. So I decided to automate it using a script or using Python, right? So I called this file HTTP file read, HTTP alert file read.py, where like I just have to enter my target, my current IP, right? That's my listener IP. And then I enter the port that I want to listen on, right? And then I enter the file, the name of the file that I want to read. So if I want to read Etsy password, I can just specify that over here. And then you can see that the exploit gets fired and then we are able to read the file, right? I did this just to make this easier for myself because we currently don't have access to we don't have access to the machine. Like we don't have shell access to the machine, right? We don't have shell access to the machine. So we would have to do a lot of reconnaissance and consistently uploading files and running the exploit to read the content of the file. Like it's a very daunting process. So I decided like to automate it so that I can just keep trying different files to see whether I can read them. Now I have this particular file on GitHub. I'll share the link with you guys after the session in the ByteTime session channel. All right, so basically this is how the script works. It allows me to read like files on the box. So using the script, we can start like looking around on the targets and seeing which other files we can read. Another file we can try to read is the Etsy host file. So we can run the exploits, and then you can see that we can currently read the Etsy host file, right? Oh, I'm going to that. We can currently read the Etsy host file. So we have like some interesting domain, another interesting domain name over here, subdomain over here called statistics.alerts.htb. We have alerts.htb over here. Now, because I've done this box before, I know like this is not the way in, right? After doing some reconnaissance, like after going through this box and all that, you come to know that we are actually supposed to read the Apache configuration file. Now, normally when you get like file read on a target, right, you want to look around the target to see if you can find any sensitive files, right, and like dump their content or read their content. Maybe you can try to look around to see if like there are any sensitive password files or anything, right? Now you realize that the server that we are dealing with is an Apache server. I didn't demonstrate that, but I think if you look at Waplizer even tells us that it's an Apache server. So we can start looking at maybe Apache configuration files, right? Apache configuration files. So we can try to read one Apache configuration file called inside the etc is it Apache 2 Apache 2.conf, right? And see whether we can read the contents of that file. Okay, so we can read the contents of that particular file. I looked through this when I was doing the box like this. There was nothing interesting over here. Now the interesting file that I read that I was able to get something that was interesting was one of the default Apache configuration files. I think it should be on my clipboard somewhere here. Okay, this is it. So now when you configure a site with Apache, right, you can specify like certain configuration. You can specify certain configuration for that particular file. And that's the configuration that we are going to look at. So we are going to look at the enabled sites on the box and then the default configuration file. Now, like these files like come by, normally these files are files created by Apache and they normally come by default. So it's one of the files that we are going to like attempt to read if we are approaching the box with no knowledge, right? So if you're someone that plays CTFs a lot, like you would know like the kind of files that you're supposed to read when you get an LFI. Sometimes you can also look online. If you look at, I think Payload All the Things and some other GitHub repositories would give you like file paths that could, or like files that could contain very sensitive information that you can try to read with an LFI. Right. So we are going to read the context of this file to see what we can get from it. And you can see over here, it's just a normal Apache configuration file for a site called alert.htb. So you can see that the document root is var www alert.htb. You can see various configurations for it. We can see there's another one too, there's another domain, right? So the server name is statistics.alert.htb and the document root is over here, right? So you can see that it follows symlinks and all that. Like these are basic configurations. Now you realize that this particular site requires basic authentication. So we can even save, or we can even add this particular domain to our Etsy host file, try to access it from the browser and see what happens. So I'm just going to do sudo vim etc host slash etc slash hosts. Okay, and I'm going to paste in that new domain name that we found. So I'm just going to go to statistics.alert.htb and see what we can get over there. You can see that there's basic authentication. Basic authentication has been enabled for this page. Okay, so you can see that is exactly what was specified inside the Apache configuration file. You can see that basic authentication has been configured for this particular domain. And you can see that it's being specified over here. Auth type is basic. And you can see auth name is what restricted area. And then auth user file. So auth user file is basically the file that contains the password, like the username and password for the basic authentication, login. Right. So we can copy this particular path, right? And remember that we already have a file read on the target. So using that path, we can try to, using that file read vulnerability, right? We can try to read the content of that file. And let's just wait. And you can see that we have a username and a password hash over here. So we have the user Albert and then we have the password hash over here. Now remember that when I read Etsy password, we had the user David and we also had the user Albert, right? So we are going to try to crack this hash. We are going to crack this hash, right? And let's just open at hashcat. Let's see hash, and let's call this Albert dot hash. Okay, it seems I already have it in here. I've done this box before, so we are calling it albert.hash. We are going to run hashcat on albert.hash. Now, I normally like to do this because I normally like to do this when I don't know the hash format, right? And I'm too, I don't know, I'm too lazy to go online and go and like now look for which kind of hash format that is. Sometimes I also realize that using hash ID and some other tools are not very like effective. Now, if you didn't know, Hashcat comes with its like own default hash detection sort of things. So you can just run Hashcat, then the file that contains the hash, and Hashcat is going to try to identify the hash for you. So where it has identified it as what Apache MD5 hash. So we are going to use this hash mode. Well, we are going to use this hash mode. We're going to specify this hash mode to crack the file. And then we specify our word list. Now I've already cracked this file before, so Hashcat is probably going to tell me that, yeah, I've cracked this hash before. I can just do the show flag. And then it shows me the password. So the password is Manchester United, right? We can use that password to access the we can use that password to access the statistics, right? x.alerts.html. Okay, so you can see the username is Albert. And we can see the password is what? That. I click on that now. So we can see we have the alert dashboard over here. We have various email addresses and their donations and all that. So I'm thinking this is sort of like the admin panel for like the normal alerts domain, right? But this is not what we are interested in, right? We earlier found out that, or when we did our Nmap scan, we saw that SSH was open. So since there's a user in the Etsy whose file called Albert, and we have a password for Albert, let's just try to see if we can like SSH into the box as that particular user using that password, right? Because you never know. Maybe the box has, or maybe that particular user is using the same password as their account password. So we paste in the password and you can see that here, we've been able to log into the box successfully as the Albert user. So we currently have user access to the box. Okay, when we run the ID command, you can see that this is the Albert user. You can see the user ID for Albert. You can see the group ID for Albert. You can see the groups that Albert is in. So first of all, Albert is in the group Albert, and it's also in the group what's management, right? So we can start looking around, right? We can start looking around. Sometimes, mostly when you get onto the box, you want to start finding files, or you want to start finding ways and means by which you can escalate your privileges, right? You realize that Albert is part of the management, it's part of the management group. And basically what you can do is that you can run a find command on the target, right? That is going to look for all maybe writable files or directories by this management group and see whether we can leverage that to what gain. We see whether we can leverage that to like escalate our privileges, right? So we can write a find command to automate that. We can write a find command to automate and do that. But then even without running the find command, right, we can do this. Okay, so like even without running the find command, we can run other commands, right? That's going to tell us like what is running on the target. Right? Maybe there's a vulnerable process that is on the target that we can abuse, right? So I just entered that PS command and you can see basically you can see a series of processes that are like running on the targets, right? I'm going to narrow this down because we want to escalate to the root user, right? So I'm going to do grep root And then you can see we have what's this script running php-bots.sh. I'm guessing that this particular script was just created by the user or the person that created this box, right? To just execute the XSS payload, right? He probably used what's the name? He probably used Selenium and the Chrome WebDriver, those things, just to automate the process of clicking on or triggering the XSS payload. But one thing that's interesting to us over here is this website monitor running on 8080. So you can see that this particular web service is running internally, and you can see it's at the path opt web monitor. So let's just try to access that directory, see what's over there. So let's say cd, paste in the path, and then do ls and see what is over there. You can see we have something that looks like a website. We have something that looks like a website over here. We can just do a curl request, right? Now, because I'm really reluctant to go and do port forwarding to see what is running on the target, I'm just using curl from inside the target to see what is on the target, like what is running over there. Let's see what's there. Okay, so it looks like it's an HTTP page. We are opening it up in our terminal, so we can't see it getting rendered or anything over here. You can see it's over here. It says that it's a website monitor. Right now, when we do an ls again, LSLA, sorry. Look at the directory list over here. You realize that there's something peculiar over here. You realize that we have the management user, the management group that has read, write, and execute. Sorry, that has read, write, and execute permissions on this config directory. Now, since if we have read, write, and execute permissions on this config directory, means we can drop a PHP file over there, try to access it, right? We can drop a PHP file over there, try to access it, and the content of that PHP file will get executed on the target. And since that particular process is running as root, we can gain code execution as the root user. So I'm just going to use echo, right, to write a malicious PHP file to that particular directory. So let me use single quotes. So PHP echo system gets, let me just make this double quotes, CMD, and close this. And then I'll write it. Let me close this up. And then I'll write it to the config directory, and I'll call this web.php. Now let's check the config directory and see whether that file got written successfully. Okay, so you can see we have web.php. Web.php has been written successfully. So as usual, I don't want to do port forwarding and all that. So I'm just going to access that particular PHP file from inside the target using curl. 127.0.0.1 on port 8080 inside the config directory called web.php. Now we'll pass it the get parameter CMD, and then we'll give it, we'll say ID, right? And see whether it gets executed as root. And right away, you can see that the command gets executed on the box and it gets executed as the root user, right? So the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm just going to enter a command that is going to change permissions on the bin bash executable. Right? I'm just hoping this doesn't get distorted because I'm doing this from the terminal. URL encoding and all that. Let's try that. It says empty reply from the server. Let's now view bin bash and see whether the SUID has been set on it. Okay, it didn't get set on it, probably because of, URL encoding and all that. So I'm going to try this again. This time I'm going to encode, I'm going to use encoded spaces. So %20. %20 is just the URL encoding. It's just URL encoding for space, right? So let's do ls earlier on bin bash again, and you can see that the SUID has been set on bin bash, right? So as usual, since we have SUID set on bin bash, we can place this in do tag p, right? And then do ID, and you can see that we are currently running as a root user, right? So I can say who am I, and we are roots. I can go into the root directory, and if you are interested in like getting the root flag, you can see we have root.txt over here. Now, just before we go, right, I just want to show you guys quickly why when we did the file inclusion with the page parameter, it wasn't working. So let's go to ls.htb. We'll cut the index.php page, right? Because that's where we found the page parameter. And when you look over here, right, you can see that there's no include statement over here. Like there's no include function. Normally, when you have file inclusion, it's normally because the user is passing some unsanitized input to a function that is able to read local files, right? But over here, you don't see any function like that. That's reading local files or the content of local files and including it in the page. Over here, you can see that what's happening over here is that there's a switch case, right? That is taking a page name, right? So if the page name is alert, it's going to replace the page, or like it's going to replace the content of the page with this particular data. If it is contacts, right, it's going to replace it with this particular data and so on. That is why that particular file inclusion over there wasn't working, because like the functionality behind wasn't even vulnerable in the first place. Okay, so I guess that's it. That's it. So if you have any questions, you can ask, or any contributions. I'm open to them.
Thank you, Max. Please, do you guys have any question on what? It has been a very long one and an interesting one on that. If you have any questions, that something you're confused about how it came about, maybe someone is just saying, okay, I'm lost at this point. This is the time for you to ask all those questions, and let's clear things off before we go off this session. Though the recording will be out, but it might take a while. So it's better for you to understand it now, and let's move on before the recording comes out later. So if you have any question, any contribution, like you said, we are open to all that. So please do all to unmute yourself and let's talk about this. Thank you.
Today the stream seems very silent. Like I'm not
Okay,
hearing from a lot of people.
there's a question in the chat
Do you
for
have
you.
any questions? Okay.
Could we have done a directory brute force on the statistic .alert.hacktheboss when we found it in the when we found it in the Etsy host file?
The directory brute force on statistics. Okay. So yeah. We could have just done a directory brute force on that, but like that is not an intended part for this box. We could have done we could have equally done that, right? If we are approaching this box from an angle where like we didn't know anything about it, right? We would have tried that to see like if there's anything available, if there's any hidden resource on that particular endpoint, right? To see if there's anything available over there. Yeah. So I mean, you can do that. You can try that too and see. Now, like I just want to mention also that like there could be multiple paths, right? I'm not saying that there are, but there could be multiple paths to like compromising the target. So if you have a suggestion like that, you can just try it out and see whether you can find other paths to be able to like compromise this target.
Any more questions from anyone? Confirm. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Okay. I think it's just someone's not really a question. BTS session should be labeled PG-32, criminal activities to the maximum. Okay, no. Any more questions from anyone? Okay, confirms that he's okay with your explanation. Any more questions? Okay, it looks like everyone is okay. Okay, one last thing, confirm, come on.
Okay, oh yes.
Confirm. Can you go ahead? Okay, I missed how he managed to read the .at password file. So he's asking you how you
Okay.
AT password file you found in there.
Okay, so before we read .ht password, right? We read the default Apache configuration file, right? And we realized that that particular site had basic authentication enabled on that site, right? So we read it's specified, right? Inside the configuration file, it was specified, right? To the part to which we had that particular okay, just a second. Let me just read the file again. Right. So over here you can see that the basic authentication has been enabled on this particular subdomain, right? And then the file that contains the authentication credentials, right? That's the username and password is statistics.alert.htv/.ht password, right? So this particular file contains the credentials for the basic authentication. So I copied this part over here since we already have file read on the targets, right? And then I placed that part over here. Now I already demonstrated how we can attain or we can get file read on the box manually, right? But because it's a very daunting process, it's a very long process, right? So I decided to automate it with Python. So when I run this, you realize that the content of the file gets read. And then we have Albert, the user Albert over here, and we have his hash over here. So we can go on and crack the hash, get the password, and SSH into the box as Albert. Confirm, are you okay? Or are there any follow-up questions? Or is the explanation good enough?
Okay, as we are waiting for confirm, someone asked about where we uploaded videos. Maybe you're also not having the knowledge. We have a YouTube channel and I've left the link in the chat session, so you can just click on it and view the other recordings and all those things. But the new ones also be uploaded very soon. So there's a follow-up question from Confirm. That's the hidden gift I want to steal from you, scripting. Oh, okay, it's not a question, just a statement. So it's everyone okay now? Are we all good? Please, if we are all good, can you guys give me a thumbs up so that I know that we are talking to everyone here, please? Okay, I'm good. Your link set is good. So links is out, Edward. Okay, confirm it's good. I don't want to pronounce your name wrongly, so I'm not going to even pronounce it. The person starting with the S. So I make a mistake in someone's name, please. Please, are you okay? Are you good? Are we good to go? Okay. All right. Edward and my dear friend name starting with the S. I don't want to pronounce your name and pronounce it wrongly. So is it Barney or maybe the last one I can pronounce it somehow. Okay, I think with that we'll bring this session to an end. And thanks for everyone for joining us today's session. And we hope to see you guys next week, Wednesday. And we hope that one of you from today's participants will be our next instructor. And we hope that one of you will be there. See you next week, Wednesday, and have a nice evening. If you still think the night is young, and have a good night if you're going to bed. Bye.